Hey everybody, it's Dr. Wood, and today I want to talk to you about what do you do now, right? You've come up with your research proposal, you've been doing your finding your references, determining what you want to include in your paper, and some of you may hopefully have even started the writing process. And now you're like, what the heck do I do now? Well, let's walk you through a few of those steps here. So first thing you want to do typically is formulate a plan. So now that you have a better idea of the research that's out there on your topic, you want to determine how best to focus your paper. This might change as you go forward. It has likely changed slightly or majorly, depending on the case, from where you started out with your original research proposal, and that's totally fine. That's what we expect to happen every year. Some of the things you want to think about in terms of how you're going to go about doing this is to get an idea of, like, is there a certain point you're trying to get across? Are you trying to maybe argue one point over another? That can help you have an idea of basically how you're going to focus your paper. And essentially you want to think about, like, what do you want your reader to get out of this? Think about who your potential audience would be based off of your topic, right? So if you're doing a surgery topic, think about what do you want surgical PAs and surgeons to get out of your paper, right? That can help to sort of focus yourself and give you an idea of how you want to actually organize the paper itself. In some cases, you may be doing a more general review of a topic, in which case, how comprehensive do you want to be? How in-depth do you want to go into some of these different topics here? So think about these sorts of questions as you go forward, and that can help you to sort of better formulate your plan. So there are two main types of people here, and especially if you've never done like medical writing before, which I surmise that maybe a few of you have not done this before. A lot of people are like, where do I even start writing? Like, how do I even get off the ground with this stuff? And I tend to find that people either fall into two sort of categories. I don't know where I picked this up from. I think it maybe had to do to something with like George R.R. Martin with Game of Thrones and all of that. But there's this concept of plotters versus pantsers. And it sounds like something I probably just made up, which it probably is. But plotters basically are people who kind of have to go into writing knowing exactly where everything is going to go prior to starting the writing. So they typically will do things like formulate an outline. They will then build a skeleton of their paper, saying basically an idea of like, okay, this paragraph, this is what I want to talk about, and some brief details of that. And then based off of your outline, then you just fill in the details, right? So then you can start to expand things out. But by having that framework to sort of build off of, that can help to keep you organized. And so you end up doing a lot of the work up front in terms of trying to determine how to place things, how to organize some of where you're going to include certain bits of literature and things like that. And then you have maybe a little less work to do on the back end of things. Okay, those are plotters. I imagine probably about half of you probably fit into that category. The other people are going to be what I call pantsers, and I tend to fall into this category myself, where basically you just start writing, and maybe it's a lot of literary diarrhea that goes on the page, and then you usually end up with like way too much stuff that you've written, and you go back through and you're like, what did I even include here? What was I even thinking when I did that? And then you end up shredding a lot of that stuff, so you write too much, which is okay. And then you start to cut back on things. Maybe you find ways to become more succinct. Maybe you want to retool certain sections because maybe you repeated something. Maybe you were not clear about something. So you tend to like write a whole bunch, and then you have to do a lot of work on the back end in order to go back and sort of edit yourself and get things cut down. And again, you probably know if you're a pantser already, but a lot of people who are maybe new to this, they don't really know which category they fall into. Figure out which one you are. Which one of these sounds like a more sort of comfortable, creative place for you to sit in. Maybe you need that outline. Maybe you hate outlines. You'll kind of know where you're going to go from there. So the general flow of the paper itself is going to be basically you start off with your introduction. You want to introduce the topic to your reader and sort of get them up to speed on the topic. So that way, because a lot of you are writing on topics that I don't honestly know a ton about. And so since I'm going to be the main person reading this stuff, I need to be able to get caught up to speed on some of these things. So, generally introduce a topic, maybe talk a little bit about the epidemiology of your topic, who it affects, how many people it affects, and get them up to speed. If you're going to include things like textbooks, this information, this is typically where it's going to be included there. Then you get into the actual body of the paper, right? So here's where you're going to get into reviewing the current literature that's out there. This is the bulk of the paper, since the body is the bulk of you. It makes sense that that's going to be the majority of the stuff. And this is the groundwork for your argument, right? You're going to be stating out all the facts, all the things that support your argument, things that are detracting from your argument, and you just kind of lay them out, right? In whatever way that you determine was best to organize it based off of the topic, based off the literature that's available, things like that. And then in your conclusion, this is where you wrap up the argument. So you basically say, okay, in the body, here's all of this research. And then now you're going to say, okay, what's my summation? What am I actually concluding here? And then another section here is where you're going to talk about the strengths and the weaknesses of the research, right? So you may come up with, some literature that supports your stuff, your hypothesis, things that maybe detract from it. And you can talk about the strengths and weaknesses of that research. Just say, well, we don't have a definitive answer on this topic because the studies have only included low numbers of people, right? Low number of study subjects. You can talk about how maybe you can't do randomized controlled trials on the type of research you're doing because of the ethics behind it, things like that. And then it's also important to think about, well, how would you suggest future research be carried out? What would you do in the future if you had, infinite resources? What would you do to answer that sort of question? And that'll sort of kind of round it out. So that's kind of the general flow of the paper, how it's going to go. Again, think about how you would like to organize things. Are you going to plot everything out and have that skeleton that you just fill out, right? So you're a plotter, or if you're just going to start writing a whole bunch of stuff and then kind of reorganize and sort of edit after the fact. But again, this is general flow. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to let me know, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks a lot. Bye.